Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
We're back at you in Gloves Off, and I'm Paul Buitrón, and I have two great guests that stood up in the capital of Texas in Austin, fighting for 50-50 parenting. Is something that we have to take care of, and something that is basically in our face for many, many people across the nation, not only Texas. Here we have Sarah Johnson and also Terry Champagne, and they were there. They were on the floor. They're advocates towards 50-50 parenting. And Ms. Sarah, I'm going to ask you to kind of explain what 50-50 parenting is and House Bill 803 is.
So House Bill 803, the only thing it really does is right now in the state of Texas, when you walk into family court, you start out at a 75-25 split of the parenting time. So the child automatically is going to lose one of their parents, unless their parents have enough money to litigate to try to get the expanded standard, which sits around 39%, depending on your school calendar. But the child still doesn't have the same 50-50 of their parents they had when they were in the same household. So all HB 803 does is it moves that starting point to a 50-50. So when you walk in there, the family courts will make the starting part of the conversation that you are, if you are determined to be fit and loving parents, so if you get joint managerial conservator, you start the conversation out at 50-50. And the presumption is that 50-50 is in the best interest of the child, but that's just where you start at. So you move that ball. So if you live too far apart to be able to make that work, the judge would move the ball. If you have other reasons that 50-50 wouldn't work out, if you have a special needs child, if one of the parents doesn't want 50-50, the non-custodial, if they don't want to be a 50-50 parent, they can elect not to do it. Then the ball would move. They would just say to the judge, I don't want 50-50. The ball would move. So there's all sorts of these factors that go into looking at parents that you're supposed to use currently in our family code to move the ball from 75-25. But the thing of it is that 75-25 we know is unhealthy and endangering children. So why are we even starting the conversation there? That's really the gist of what HB 803 does. Taryn, did I miss anything?
I think, thanks, Sarah, for kind of laying the groundwork of that. I think there's a couple things that individuals who may be dealing with this or may in the future go through with this, like you were talking about presumptions, right? So the standard possession order is presumed. It's a rebuttable presumption that is in the best interest of the child. It's also presumed that joint managing conservatorship is in the best interest of the child. So both parents walking in there are presumed to act in that child's best interest unless proven right. But what ends up happening is you end up with a situation, well, I'm determining that even though both of you are fit, willing, able, and I'm awarding you joint managing conservatorship, this other parent is better to raise the child, if we can even use that. And quite honestly, when you get into comparing that better parent thing, that ends up injecting a lot of personal bias. Parents do what they think is best for their children, and our Constitution protects that, the right to companionship and society with your child. And we shouldn't be having to sling mud or fight or anything like that. You walk in there and you both get equal possession. Former Representative Gina Kalani noted last session when a similar bill, in fact, the exact same bill, just with a different number, once you go and separate and divorce, once you're done dividing up the property, you're all done with pretty much everything but people keep going back because they want to be with their child. And this ends up generating huge amounts of profit because people will continue to fight to be in their children's life.
Well, both of you are absolutely correct. And it's sad, and I've been through it, like many other parents have. And you end up in court, you end up divorced for whatever reason, but that does not mean you don't love your children. You see, and that's what judges, in my opinion, and lawyers have place fathers mostly, because this happens with fathers mostly, in a turmoil to the point that it's always looked at that they do not want to be with their child. And that's not the case. And we need to start off on an equal ground. If both parents are how can I put it, are sane, they have no problems, they're not dangerous to society, and they both love their parents, their children, they should be loving parents, and they should both have equal time together. That's what I find with the conversations with Sarah is with your son, how 50-50 actually works. It's a perfect example, and it should be used. It should not be a money-making object for lawyers, but it is. That's why people are finding themselves back into court.
Professor, right. You bring up a really good point about you led off with this, that people automatically have the presumption about fathers kind of getting the raw end of the deal. The neat thing about that, and not neat in that this is happening, but neat that you reference this stereotype that's out there, is we actually have the data now to prove it. So in a public information request from the Office of the Attorney General, we can see across the state of Texas, so there's 1,495,302 cases. And of those, the father is the non-custodial parent in 91.07% of those cases. That's an overwhelming amount. Sarah, would you like to comment on that?
So on the flip side of that is when you look at the numbers of the custodial parents and guardians in the state of Texas, 92.47% of those are women. Now, I know that there is some concept or idea that people don't want to believe this data because it seems unreasonable. But this is data that came from the Attorney General's office to justify the numbers that are actually published on their website that say around 90% of the custodial parents in the state of Texas are women. So instead of saying around and having a guesstimate, we asked for the data to back that up to get the details. So the simple fact is it doesn't matter if you don't like the facts and numbers. Data doesn't lie. It is what it is. And Representative Frank brought up a great point last night. If it was the reverse, if 92.47% of custodial parents in the state of Texas were men, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. This bill would have flown through. This would not be, I have been at this for 4.5 years. Taryn, I don't know how long you've been at it. But a lot of the leaders in the shared parenting community have been at it for decades. There was a gentleman who testified last night who has been at it since the 80s.
Yes, Robert Green. It was amazing listening to him.
Yes, if it was the reverse. So if I was in there talking about how for women's equality that the men were getting all the children, I would not have had doors closed on me. I would not have had refusals to have meetings. I would not have had a lot of the reactions that I had at the Capitol throughout the session. Now, I'm not saying everybody. There were a lot of welcoming reps and their staff, but there were some that simply and totally, because I volunteer with a group called the Fathers' Rights Movement, disregarded everything that I had to say, regardless of the fact that I'm a woman.
That's interesting because regardless, I remember when I'm gonna go back to when the first steps, when my ex-wife and I decided to go into a divorce. I remember we led, and she said, you know what, we couldn't live together anymore. That was the end of the gist. And I remember she says, I've been reading on 50-50 parenting. We went in there with two attorneys that knew that we had already agreed to 50-50 parenting. And I ended up with 7 different decrees that were signed with all kinds of stuff on them from all over, from me not having any weekends to not even standard to extended standard. And it took me years to go out and back in there and fight it out. And it was all because of the maliciousness that I saw, and I can say this and I'll say it openly, of the attorneys and the judge that's on the presiding. And I saw the whole case kind of like you were a criminal. You're a father. You cannot be with your children kind of thing. Go over there and fix it again. And you look at this and you say to myself, wait a minute, if this is what the court thinks of fathers, of dads throughout Texas, then we're in a sad case. They're the first ones that are calling about juveniles going back into juvie court over and over and over, saying, you know what, we're the fathers here. You guys are the ones that are destroying them. So please don't come over and say that it's our fault when you guys are the ones that are removing us from their lives. So it's kind of sad where everything ends up in, but I'm glad that, and I want to thank both of you, and I want to thank everybody that went there yesterday and that are fighting this fight and were there for hours on end, because then I'm going to touch base into that. And it's going to lead into my next question is, you all got there early yesterday, right? Did you all
At 8 o'clock.
Did you all feel the need that they were trying to push you all away politically for this not to be heard?
You want to go first, Sarah?
I feel like that it was definitely tactful responses. I really feel like that there was a lot of game playing. I feel like that we had a late hearing for politically motivated reasons. I feel like our testimony, we could have gone earlier in the morning. They could have gotten through us and we would have been done much quicker. But we were pushed later and later and later. And as we got later, we had more people who had to leave, because when you're coming from all over the state and you have a 6-hour drive, you can't stay until 11 p.m. to testify on a bill. So I really feel like that there was some less than ethical, less than appropriate planning in how everything was done.
And along with that, so we live in these COVID times now, right? And fortunately, unfortunately, kind of however you want to look at it, I look at it as fortunate. We've opened up the world of Zoom. I mean, we're talking to each other right now through Zoom, which is cool. You can go talk to anybody all over the world. You can hold these meetings. And at the hearing, there was Zoom testimony, but it was limited. There were many parents across the state of Texas who submitted requests to be able to Zoom testify, but they were denied because a decision was made to limit Zoom testimony. Now, I don't know what methodology they use to determine who would and who cannot testify, but once you open it up, it only seems fair that if you have that option for some, it should be for all.
And to add on top of that, I don't know the numbers, but I can tell you, at least in perspective, or in how it was viewed to me, is it seemed like the majority of the Zoom testimony was against HB 803. It certainly did not seem like it was even. We'll have to go back and look at the numbers, but it did not seem that way from my seat.
Yes, I only recall one, Dr. William Fabricius out of Arizona, which anybody who is in the fight for shared parenting, parental rights, equal parenting. You need to read his research that he's put out there. He was instrumental in helping craft and study the rebuttable presumption they have in Arizona, which is to maximize parenting time. And he's spoken quite at length on all of this. He testified on the bill, but was only given the 3-minute testimony. And interestingly enough, despite having a world-renowned expert at their fingertips, there were no questions of Dr. Fabricius, which I found a bit disturbing.
Well,
In line with that, though, also, we had other experts, if you will, on 50-50. So I know that there was a large conversation that happened during the evening about how 50-50 would feel from a child's perspective. And my own child got up there to testify in favor of HB 803 and to present himself as an expert, as the child who does it, to the legislators, to let them ask him questions, to let them ask specific things. I know he did. So some of the comments were about the children feeling like they live in a suitcase, and Jeremy rewrote his entire speech that he is planning on giving just before his testimony in order to address those statements and concerns. But not a single question was asked concerning the bill. I was very appreciative of Representative Chairwoman Nave and her interaction with him and Representative Frank. They were super amazing on that aspect, but I was very disappointed to see that the people that are considering this bill that is for the children had the opportunity to ask any question that they could come up with to a child that does it, to set either their concerns to the side, to see if there was any information that they may need, any of that, and not a single question was asked of him. Also, no questions were asked of the actual 50-50 parents that got up there. I had to revise my testimony just before I got up there, but I did say I was a 50-50 stepmom. But there were no questions asked of us about being 50-50 parents. What did it do with the conflict? What did it do with any of these things that we keep hearing about? They had ample opportunities with real life practical experts in this, and no questions about that were asked of any of us. Unless, Taryn, did I miss any of those for anybody else that I missed that have 50-50?
Well, before I continue, Professor, did you have any questions for Sarah?
I have one there. Do you all feel that who were the main ones that were against it? Was it basically attorneys, or who were against the 50-50?
So the individuals who testified against 50-50 were majority attorneys. There were a couple other individuals that did testify against it, but the overwhelming majority were attorneys. But to be fair, because there are good attorneys out there, there were 2 attorneys that testified in favor of the bill. So let's give credit where it's due. And I'm a positive guy, so I want to focus on some of the positive. While the majority of testimony against was attorneys, we did have 2 that came and spoke in favor of us. So kudos to them.
Sure, true. And good job for everybody that's fighting for it, for this, you know. And I was kind of guessing to the fact that those who are going to be opposed will probably be the associations of family law and attorneys of that nature. Of course, you know, you're digging into their pocket. If it's 50-50 and everything's honky-dory, they don't have to go back to court. They don't have to charge people to go back to court. But I'm looking at it this way: if the majority of 90% is against men, then why do we need the attorney to go into the divorce court from the beginning? We could just do it pro se.
So that brings up a fascinating point. So while it wasn't brought up for this specific bill, earlier in the day, there were other bills being heard, and the family law attorneys were furious that 40% of the individuals going through the family law courts now are pro se. Now, I don't see why they should be furious. These people are empowering themselves, which, is assuming a very positive thing. But once again, I believe it is because that they're not breaking in that sweet $350 to $450 an hour, representing someone that, is not going to win. Like I said earlier, if 91% of the non-custodial parents are fathers, why bother spending that $5,000 retainer if you already know what you're going to walk out with? They should really, casinos, you're going to go in there and you're probably going to lose. The fair thing to do would at least let the people know, especially the fathers, that your chance of winning, the custodial parentship is less than 10%. Let me just kind of tell you, let me pull the numbers on this for you. So we got by custodial parent by relationship to dependent, and this data is from November 29th of last year. Fathers are the custodial parent in only 6.19% of cases across the entire state of Texas. I want to say that again. 6.19% of cases. That's out of 1,495,302 cases. You only got that much as fathers.
Well, and Taryn, on top of that, the opposition testified that if you are, the reason why they do that is because typically it's the mothers that take care of the children. They're the primary caregivers. We do still have stay-at-home moms. My feminism soapbox was just like, hop on up here. But they also said that if you were a father that was a stay-at-home father, that you would get primary custody. And one of the dads that actually got up there, he was the primary caregiver, and he ended up with standard possession, and he is the non-custodial parent. So there's a large difference between what the opposition to the family law reform bill say is supposed to happen and what actually happens in court. And Representative Swanson, she did start asking some questions of one father. He was talking about how he had filed and he was trying to get his elections that everyone in the opposition says is just like a magic checkbox. You ask for them and you get them. And so she was asking, well, if this is your right, how were you denied that? And the man said, I don't know. They didn't tell me because there is no explanation given in our family court system. You can ask for expanded standard, but the judges never have to give you an answer of why, if they're ruling that that is not in the best interest of the child, they should have to explain that. And they don't. They just say, nah, we're sticking with standard. Cookie cutter, we're done.
That's it. You're absolutely correct, and it does happen that way. You see, what's going on, I'm going back to that nice little piece of paper called the Constitution of the United States. It says, we the people. Okay, it doesn't say we the judges or we the representatives or we the Senate or Congress. It says we the people. And what we the people have been forgetting to do is hold their politicians accountable for it. If they're elected officials and they're not cutting the case, we should vote them out of office, period. Plain and simple, okay? But what happens in Texas, you have a lot of magistrates that are appointed and they stay there for years because they were appointed because of a board of judges in a county appoints people into different courts. You have a lazy judge that got elected and he's supposed to be taking a drug court. So what is he going to do? He's going to appoint his friend to become an associate of this court to handle all drug cases or all cases that go to the district attorney or the county attorney or even our state. And guess what happens? They'll literally open up another court for that. Those are the judges that we never see on the ballot, but they're always there. And we have to be very, very careful to start changing that. If you're a judge and you're having a gavel, you have to be elected. Why do we have to have people vote individuals in that we have no clue on who they are, what they do, how they think, and yet alone are there for, some of them are set for 20 years. And and I can tell you that right here in Webb County. We got no magistrate for this. No, he's a magistrate for the other one. Well, I thought he was the one that we elected. So we have to be very, very careful and keen to what's going on. And I think that's what's been, and you can't touch them. They're just untouchable. They're there.
You know, Travis County, I'm from Austin. They have that same problem. I remember watching, or last time I went to vote, right? And there were judges on the ballots. These judges were running unopposed. There was nobody there to oppose them and kind of hold their feet to the fire, so they don't have to behave. They don't have to listen to the people because they don't sense any threats. Now,
Absolutely.
in addition, when those judges are running for office and you ask them, hey, what are you going to, what do you feel on this issue? They dodge, they dance around it because they don't have, they're like, well, judicial canons, and I might rule on something related to this. So you have no idea who these people are who are being elected. And you only find out through wonderful things like our data request what their actual beliefs are. It sounds, based on the data, they think moms need to be taking care of kids.
Our family code is very much so misogynistic and archaic, and it is based on laws that started being put into place in the 1950s and 1960s. At the time when all of this first started, generally moms were stay-at-home and the primary caregivers of children. But as our society has changed and as we have grown, women we make up 46% of the Texas workforce. I know of all of the people I know in my life, I know 2 stay-at-home moms. One, because she believes in homeschooling and she homeschools her children. And the other, for the exact same reason. Those are the only 2 women that I know are full-time stay-at-home mothers. And it is simply and totally because they had zero faith in our public school system and felt it was better to homeschool their children. I don't know anybody who has a husband who has enough of an income that they don't work, or even if he does have enough of an income that doesn't have a job of their own, a goal, a professional life that they want to have outside of their home and their children. And for the state of Texas, when we walk into family court to tell women that they have to give up on those dreams, that they can't be the breadwinners in their family, or they're going to lose custody of their children, according to the Texas Family Law Foundation, that is exactly what they said. If the man is the primary caregiver, he will get custodial parent, he'll get 75%, and these moms should get 25%. So we tell them they can do whatever, young girls, and then they step into family court and we put them in a June Cleaver dress and we tell them your primary job is to be a mom. Your hopes, your dreams, your career path you had planned, forget it all. You, ma'am, are a mom.
You're that's what I'm telling you, that we need to change this, and there's so many different avenues that we need to change. Not only do we have to change term limits for our public officials, we have to keep them straight. There has to be some check and balances, which there's not in a judicial elected and appointed officials. There's not one. We have to make sure that the laws have changed for custody. And not only that, we also have laws that have to be changed for the visitation. There's so many facets to this. It's just not one. There's not one that's going to fix everything, because it's all screwed up. And how many parents, how many fathers and mothers go through every first, third weekend of the month calling the police because they can't see their child.
Absolutely. And thank goodness that Representative Raymond brought his bill and it was able to be heard in committee a couple weeks ago. Hopefully, everything goes well and we can have a punishment for those individuals who would interfere with child custody.
Absolutely.
We also have Senate Bill 2011, which also deals with interference in child custody, and that was submitted. The author is Senator Menendez here in San Antonio. So we have a couple of bills that really are focusing on that, because not only are we endangering children by dropping them to a dangerous 25% of the time with their other parent, but once you start that alienation and you start dropping that percent lower and lower and lower, the more endangered they get. And once you start doing that, that becomes mental and emotional abuse on those children. So when you are specifically targeting and trying to destroy that child's relationship with their other parent, you have now made yourself an abuser. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Not only that, but we've seen the rise in a lot of different issues in our community over the last several years. One of the concerns I have as a woman is the rise in this, what I consider a very dangerous movement out there called the protective mothers. They are generally linked with women who are alienators, and they're alienating their child. And some of them, I'm sure, are actual true stories. But some of them are using this as an excuse to push their alienation, to continue to accuse the other parent of ungodly harm to the children, simply and totally as an alienation tactic in order to sever that relationship with the children and that other parent. Now, these protective mothers typically also fall through a connection with the mothers that we have seen an increase in felicide, where parents are murdering their children. The Australian government, and I spoke about this in my testimony, the Australian government was so concerned with the rise in felicide that they actually did a 12-year study on cases from 2000 to 2012 of parents who have murdered, or of children who were murdered by their parents. And what that study very clearly shows is custodial mothers and their significant others are a much, much greater risk to children than non-custodial fathers and their significant others. So it was 46.83%, I believe, of custodial mothers were of the cases, and 14 point something percent of stepfathers, 9.88%. I'm going off my memory here, so I could be off by a little bit. Were non-custodial parents, and there were 0 cases of a stepmother or father's girlfriend being the murderer that were caught in that 12-year study. So as a child, or as an adult that was a child of, my biological father was one of those stories that people got up and testified to fearmonger that men are dangerous to their children. My young life was not a pleasant story in any shape, way, form, or fashion. But the thing of it is you can't use children like me as an excuse and as a shield to allow laws to abuse and harm millions of other children. That's unacceptable. That's offensive. The number of men who are actually those kind of people, that though they're outliers, they're very few and far between. We push this narrative that it's every dad. I really wish that the male committee members would have listened to some of this testimony, because I could hear it. A lot of these people that outside of the lawyers, when they were talking about abuse, their statements were very clear to me. Every man is an abuser. And that is dangerous in and of itself. We can't take the bad sins of a few and put it across everyone. And I really wish those men on the committee would realize that if they were in the same spots as the dads that were there to testify, they would be the ones that were being accused of being dangerous to their children simply and totally because they are men.
You see, like I said, there is that bias that runs through the courts that fathers are dangerous individuals and should be held like criminals. That's what I got out of the court that I got into, and the attitude of the way the judge and everybody else perceives. And when you talk to attorneys, they're kind of like, so I'm near my end. I still got, 3 more years with my little ones, and they will always be my loved ones. But I know some are just starting right now, and their children are much younger. And I don't wish this upon anybody. And the reason we're all fighting this is not only for ourselves, but more important for our children, for that not to happen to our children. Because right now, the court system is faulty. The court system is very discriminatory, and the court system is very abusive. And it's not going to change until we gather together and say it's not going to happen anymore and start voting these individuals out. And until that happens, we're going to still be fighting in state capitals trying to get heard of. Look I'm going to, great example that I'm going to show right now is I'm going to talk about, remember MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers?
Yes.
They went after district attorneys, and they went after them hard back in the 90s. And in fact, they removed a lot of district attorneys in cities. And guess what? The district attorneys, when they hear MAD, they kind of just sit down and get quiet very, very quickly, so they all of a sudden they start sending people that had tickets for 3, 4, 5 years ago into county jail because of their tickets that were out, and they hadn't done anything about it. But if we had an organization that was like that, you will see a different change and a different tune being played. And hopefully everybody can band together and be strongful. And this is not about parties, because I've seen the behavior of both Republican and Democrats. And I've seen Democrats champion, and I've seen Republicans stand up and champion these bills. And it's more of an individual, and the individuals care. But as party lines draw, it's no longer party lines. This is about the care of each child that's out there. And it crosses party lines, it crosses social lines as well. It's in our face, and we can't just hide behind something and say it doesn't happen. It's here. It's in our face.
If I were a political consultant or a strategy campaign person, I'll tell you what, you come out there and say you're for equal parenting. Remember what I said, there's 1,495,302 cases in Texas. Even if a third of those were to vote for you, or you said, I'm for equal parenting, and there are a third of them that want that, they're going to come out and vote for you. There are people out there who champion this cause, whether it's attorneys, whether it's, politicians. Those people instantly become celebrities, not only in their local areas, but nationwide. And it draws a lot of attention to that. And for those that are against it, we need to let them know that this is political suicide. You cannot ignore these issues. And really, last night in the Capitol, that deliberate ignoring was on incredible display by both members of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. There was overwhelming testimony in favor of this. And there were two individuals on that committee who decided they were against shared parenting and they were going to tear those people who they thought were weak apart. And I'll tell you, that was incredibly unprofessional. I know, Professor, you teach martial arts. I've been practicing martial arts. I teach martial arts. And I can only imagine the strong picking on the weak. In that situation, we wouldn't tolerate it. So, taking it kind of on a bigger scale, we can't be tolerating the kind of gaslighting that they were doing. To reference what, Sarah was talking about earlier, one person kept asking, well, what went wrong? Well, these people are telling you something's wrong and you're ignoring them and trying to figure out what went wrong. They were being gaslit with being told, well, maybe you're a bad parent or you didn't understand things, or, the judge made the situation right. When you have over 100 people that are there to testify in favor of some, and so many of those people testifying that they've got this standard possession order and there is no magic checkbox, you got to wonder if those people actually are there for their constituents or for their own personal interest. And I'm not just talking about their local constituents, because they are on the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, which means they represent those issues for all Texans, not just the ones in their district.
No, you're absolutely correct. I did not witness that, but I can just imagine that stuff like that does occur. It occurs in all levels so it seemed that it occurred there as well, and it's sad because that's when you realize when somebody already has a political agenda and they're going after their own agenda. And unfortunately, like I said, our system is shot. We need checks and balances, and we're the only ones that can do it. If we all unite together in a common cause for good, things will get done at the end. And, because it's heartbreaking to see somebody that's going to go in there and they're told by their attorneys, you're going to get 50-50. I was told, yeah, you're going to get 50-50. You come out with something else. They're like, well, that's what you got. No, I mean, what happened to 50-50? You understand what I'm saying? And you have prosecutorial misconduct when you're a defendant in a crime and it's a criminal case, and the DAs, they're prosecuting that and they tamper with witnesses, or they'll tamper with whatever, and they can get sentenced and they can get fined, and there's stuff against that. Okay, there's way out of there, but there's no judicial misconduct anywhere. And you see it abruptly in these courts, the way they treat people, and it's just like, Jesus, you guys are supposed to be King Solomon, and you guys are not even the court jester, and you guys are out here doing this stuff to parents.
That judicial conduct, a couple months ago, there was actually a hearing, and I don't want to get too far off track because our focus is on House Bill 803 and how things went last night. But there was a hearing by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, I want to say late middle of last year, maybe like August, September. And of all the people testifying, all the people testified about what's going on in these courts. There were no complaints about criminal courts. There were no complaints about anything else. All these people had seen issues in family courts. And I think that's telling that that's what all these complaints are about. Sarah, do you have anything to add on that, or?
I just kind of want to go back to what I had talked about earlier and then what you kind of referred to. So on the gaslighting comment, you don't have to like the facts and the data. And it was very clear that there were some individuals that were not happy with the facts and the data. And I've actually had a conversation with our opposition where they made assumptions about what our facts and data contained without asking, without verifying with me, without doing anything. They jumped to a conclusion. And I really feel like it was very telling in last night's that their conclusion that they jumped to was also a conclusion that was jumped to and referred to in other conversations with some committee members. And you don't have to like the fact that the data proves our point. I like the fact that they are not happy our data proves our point. That means I've got your attention. That means you agree with me. We have a problem. But you can't just go around accusing people of like making the numbers not work, because we all know our opposition is the crowned kings of fuzzy math. This is straight data, straight from the source, with doing nothing but sorting it so we could accurately talk about that. So Taryn, do you mind kind of explaining how the data looks so we can kind of make sure everybody understands in this podcast that they're watching where that data came from, how it was displayed, and how we got to those numbers? You're our main data whiz.
Yeah, so this public information request came from the Office of the Attorney General. Basically, the underlying principle of this is that on the Office of the Attorney General's website, they list that 90% of non-custodial parents are fathers and 10% are mothers. So a public information request was put in, and they specifically asked, can you show me the numbers for this underlying conclusion? And so what they came back with was the information relating to, what the breakdown is of the custodial and non-custodial parent by relation to the child. And now these are for cases. So there may be some skewing, that there may be more children affected by this, because it didn't say what a case exactly is. So it can be one kid, maybe two kids, maybe three, heck, maybe even 5 or 6 for those really big families who really take be fruitful and multiply to heart. But, there were still 1,495,302 cases. And all we did was put that information together. We summed up the totals and divided by the total amount, and that. Now, one of the representatives, who once again was very unprofessional when I tried to approach him about this data, attempted to conflate what we were doing with saying that these were contested cases. This didn't happen in any of the testimony. And in fact, when other individuals other than myself, I tried approaching him one-on-one, I didn't need to call him out in front of everybody. He rebuffed me. And I told him the source of the data being the Office of the Attorney General, and he claimed I had some sort of agenda regarding this and that I wasn't reading the numbers right. I can assure you that the methodology in that, I've read the original request. It simply asks the number of non-custodial parents by relation to the child and the number of custodial parents by relation to the child. And the data is fresh. It's from November of last year. So this guy, like Sarah was saying, he didn't care about the facts. So I think with some of what was going on last night, it's clearly shown us we've reached a point where we can only go so far with facts and numbers and testimony. Like I said, 100+ people signed up to testify, and they don't want to hear the voices of Texas from across the state. So what the professor's saying is true. We need to let them know and send a very clear message that, hey, we've tried to be nice to you. We've tried to do everything right. We tried to follow the political process. Everybody last night, man, I want to just touch on a real positive thing. Everybody's testimony last night, from the new people to the seasoned veterans, was great. It was phenomenal. It was professional. It was respectful. And then the response we got was, oh, well, you guys just aren't good parents, blah, blah, blah. Even with all the studies cited, because our people testifying cited the sources from their studies. So they said, Linda Nielsen's study from 2000 whenever and stuff like that. And they named the studies. So those members of the committee can go back and actually find this information. Our opposition, the studies that they alluded to, their experience, there's nothing quantifiable. They're like, oh, well, this is what can happen. This is what does happen. But once again, us in the trenches fighting for equal parenting, shared parenting, parental rights, we have the numbers, we have the research, we want to give it to them, and they're not interested. And the legislators were not interested in listening to this, which I find appalling, that they're not willing to make decisions or consider making decisions based on facts and statistics.
What
I
I
don't know what
find,
to tell you.
yeah, what I find even strange on top of that is that this bill, there's 22 representatives that have signed on to this bill. We have bipartisan support. So a bill that is somehow dangerous to the children of Texas, that is somehow this horrid thing, you're not going to have 22 representatives from across the state of Texas that have signed on to this. You're not going to have senators on the other side that are ready to do their part for this. You're not going to have all of this support if all of these veiled comments about it being bad for the children were true. So we have facts and studies on our side. They have none. There are no studies that I'm aware of. Taryn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 0 studies that say the standard possession order is in the children's best interest or healthy to them. Everything says the opposite.
In fact, Texas's standard possession order was studied by Edward Kruk, Dr. Edward Kruk, in 2017. I believe he's out of Nova Scotia in Canada. He studied it, and what he found was, the kids being restricted to 1/5 the time, it prevents those kids from developing that healthy bond with their parents, which come from those little things which, gee, if you had more time, or hell, even equal time, you could do those. Doing homework with the kids, tucking them in at night, reading them their bedtime stories, getting them ready for school, having that, those small moments that really, when you're older, you'll think back and be like, Dad always made me peanut butter and banana sandwiches or whatever, Yeah, you'll remember big trips, but really those little tender moments that can only come through time.
No, and you're absolutely correct. And that is what's removed. And that's a sadness. And I bring it back. The person that starts parental alienation is a man or woman that has a gavel and wearing the black robe. They're the ones that plant the seed. They're the ones that knock it into the dirt when they hit the gavel. And then it's continually watered by the continual interference for child custody by all our law enforcement in the state of Texas, because they're all at fault at that.
I'm actually going to disagree with you there. I disagree on where parental alienation starts. I believe that it starts in our family code, which is where that judge gets their direction. So they get their direction from the family code, which is the original alienator.
No, you're absolutely correct. But we can't change the fact that they're the ones that gavel it, because they're in the family court. They also have the right that they can see both parents and what their parents want to agree to, and they'll push it to the fact that it's either extended visitation or just standard. Regardless if a father or mother come in here and they say, we're going to get a divorce or what have you, they're going to start them off from there. They don't want to hear anything else. And that's the majority, vast majority of those that are in there. So it still comes back to the one that's having the gavel. And so right now, what we all have to do, and the energy that we all have, is not only do that, besides changing the code and the family law, we have to change how the terms of these judges are, and as well as how come we have way too many that we do not know who their names are. They've never been in a ballot, and they're sitting in chairs for 10, 12, 20 years with never ever been elected. We have to change all that right now. If you're going to go out there and you're going to be able to condemn people, because this is what they're doing, condemning a parent from seeing the child. When you're condemning people, you have to be able to be voted in by the people for you to be able to have that right. And we have way too many You know, all the courts here in the state that are just getting appointed because they held a sign, political sign, when somebody was running. And it goes back to voting people in and voting people out. That's the bottom line right now. And until we can do that, until we all can do that, this is going to continue 10, 20, 30 years down the road. It's not going to change. Until we can physically do what the mothers did with MAD, then that's the only time when people are going to basically look and say, you know what, they're serious.
Yeah, but I mean, even this session, I feel like last night was so much different than the previous session or even the session before that.
Hold on, the session before that where we didn't get a hearing on the bill. So it's completely different because.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up. I was just going to say we've made improvements, but thanks for pointing out that, Darren.
I mean,
you guys did excellent. You guys, you know, when I saw the pictures of you guys being in there, you guys posting everything in there, it was so energetic. People were in there fighting for the rights. It's the most beautiful thing you can see. Okay, parents fighting for their children. And
yeah, just
now we have to
dads.
Now we have to take into how many of those dads are their children are 17, 16, 17. They're already to the end of this fight that we're not going to see anymore once they turn 18. Then you're going to see the ones that are going to be running around that they just got a divorce and their child's a toddler. You're going to see them for the next 8 years. So we have to continue with those that are about to leave, for them to continue doing what they're doing and motivate. So this is a never-ending cycle. And I think, I don't know, I'm looking at that plan of what MAD did. That's my only objective. I mean, objective to actually do it. We can physically make an organization just like MAD, that we can raise money, support candidates that support 50-50 and support that are against parental alienation, and remove those that are sitting down there looking pretty and doing nothing.
Well, like you said, right? So we got a bunch of people that their kids are going to age out.
Yep.
Sarah mentioned Robert Greene from here in Austin, Texas, who was fighting in the 80s. Now, see, you got that man who's been fighting, 40 years now for this? But what I will say is people don't need to necessarily, I mean, you obviously need your personal dog in the fight, but a bigger part of my dog in this fight is I never, ever want my son to ever have to do this. If he wants to be a father, he should have that right from the get-go. He does not need to have to go through court. If he had to, I would just tell him represent yourself, because at least you're defending yourself, because you're not going to be paying out the wazoo for an attorney that's going to get you nothing. But all those people need to look further down the road. If you're in the fight, it means you have kids. And unfortunately, marriage ends in a large portion of the cases. People throw out, 50% of all marriages end in divorce. I don't have the numbers on that, but even still, it's a common stereotype that a lot of marriages end in divorce. That means this becomes, just like you said, Professor, it's intergenerational.
Well, like my family, we're all children of divorce at some point in time in our lives. So, which is why we were able to see the impacts in Jeremy when we went to standard possession. So I've actually never had a dog in this fight since I've been part of this community. My family's had 50-50 from before I became a part of this movement. My child turns 18 this year, but this is for him. So of my son and his 5 friends, statistically, one of them are going to be in you guys' shoes. And it needs to not still be this way when we get to them, because we know the difference between standard possession. We know the impacts that 50-50 has. We know all these things, and we need to catch up with the science. So everyone is always, for the last year, haven't we all been hearing, believe the science, believe the science? Why are we ignoring the science on this? Just because it's something that's unpleasant that you don't want to admit is a problem does not mean the science is not valid. It does not mean that the experts in child development, they should be listened to. Who is an expert in children? The lawyers or a child psychologist? Who's an expert in long-term impacts on a child? A lawyer or someone like Dr. Fabricius, who has done study after study on different age groups and different amounts of time that these custody plans are involved in children's lives. I know not everybody likes this comparison, but if you get on an airplane and the stewardess comes over the intercom and says that a aeronautic lawyer who focuses on airlines, they directed some engine repairs that you needed done on your plane, would you stay in your seat? Or would you get up and walk off that plane until they got a qualified mechanic that knew how to work on that motor and was an expert on that motor to do it? Because I would not allow a lawyer, just because they practiced in something that had to do with the aerospace, direct safety things on my plane. That's when you break it down in something other than the family lawyers and family law reform, it doesn't make sense, the formula that we're using over who has the influence to influence the family law reform. It just doesn't. It's not logical. It's not safe for children. It's certainly not in line with our Texas state constitution in any shape, way, form, or fashion. This committee is supposed to be working on juvenile justice and family issues committee for every family and every juvenile across the state of Texas. That's what their committee is for. I cannot express, I don't want it to seem like Taryn and I are bashing specific representatives or the representatives necessarily as individuals. But it was this session has been a very huge eye-opener for me. And it's very disappointing to see the amount of power that lobbyists have over what bills get heard and over what desperately needed legislation is ignored. And how the people who are advocating it, the normal Texans, the grassroots people, the people spending their own money, the people voluntarily coming up there, all 150 people yesterday took time off their jobs and sat at the Capitol. My child missed school and we were at that Capitol for 12 plus hours.
And I want to
That
thank you
lobbyist
all
was
for
being
that.
paid to be there. I was not.
You know, and that's what's heartbreaking, because these lobbyists probably, I'm not saying this, most of them would, you know, pay for dinner, pay for whatever. Some of them get trucks. That's why we have lawsuits all over the place with them. But what happens is it goes back down to the fact that we have people that we, the people, never elected. And if we did elect, are sitting in there condemning good parents from seeing their kids. And to me, we have to start with the family courts. You want to fix a law, it's not going to be fixed. Lawyers are the ones that make those laws. So they're going to be fighting against it because they're already making money with it. Let's remove their judges, or let's find out that how can we actually set up, you know, you have a large, one of the largest associations is Association of Justices of the Peace and Council Associations of Texas. Try changing them. See if they're not going to jump around. Okay? So we need to actually start seeing why are we appointing people? Because I see a lot of appointments in these courts, and you're like, where you come from? Oh, he's an appointee. Well, why was he appointed? And he's representing them. He was never elected, and they're sitting down there for years. Okay? For years. And that's one thing that we also have to change. You know, like I said, we live in the system of family court. Our courts are screwed up as it is. And we're not having the ability to actually be able to change that because we're not being allowed to vote for that. You see, everybody's fighting their own battles. We need to unify together in order for us to move forward. And if that doesn't happen, we're still going to be in this fight. And I'm probably going to be in this fight, God forbid, for my nephew right next to him, or for my son, or for a friend of mine still being in that battle, because it's going to continue. Just like you said, the statistics are there. And we have great people out there, all the representatives that signed and co-signed the bill and authored it. Thank you all for championing this. Thanks, Representative Raymond, for that. We have to praise these individuals that actually care.
If I could.
Go ahead.
If I could, speaking of that praise, two members of that committee have signed on to the bill. So Representative Leach and Representative Vasut. And they were in there swinging last night for this bill. When the people, and they need to be praised. And also, even though he hasn't signed on, and I hope he does, Representative Frank also was having a hard time wrapping his mind around, and he let those that were against the bill, he was having a hard time wrapping his mind around why we can't just start off as equal. And he made that point. If the genders were reversed on these statistics, there would be an outrage, and this would be a no-brainer to pass. So all three of them, once again, Representative Leach, Representative Frank, and Representative Vasut, all need to be praised for their conduct last night. It was outstanding and stellar.
Absolutely. And I'm going to take that, what you said, changing the genders, okay? If the genders were changed in the stats, I guarantee you that an organization similar to MAD would have come up 40 years ago, and it would have already been changed before drunk against drunk drivers would have ever even been a dream. Okay, believe me, that would have been changed.
One of the things I did whenever we were visiting the Capitol, and I would bring up the statistic, is that I would say, okay, pretend that you have a new company that came in your district, and somebody calls and they're complaining because 50% of the applicants were men, 50% of the applicants were women. But when you look at the actual staff that they hired, of those that they hired, 92.47% were men. We would see we have a problem, yes? I had every single office, including those that on the committee that we feel were very anti the bill, even them themselves or their offices, whoever I was speaking to, agreed with me that those statistics show we have a problem when you flip the script.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
and again, it's not just from a sexual discrimination against men. We also need to continue to have the conversation of how much stress and pressure those numbers put on the women of Texas. We need to continue to talk about those women of us in this community. We need to continue to talk about how it keeps women from being able to get the jobs that they want. We need that mom that testified last night, who testified because she travels for work, that she was penalized and given 25% as a non-custodial parent. We need to make sure they understand that these judges apply this stuff in insane orders, and it's not across the board, and that the only saving thing we can do is to try to start in the middle so that the judge's own personal bias in whether or not they feel a woman should be out in the workforce or at home in the kitchen is applied in family court. Because I feel that that woman, that powerful boardroom, excellent speaker, because I spoke to her and I had a long conversation with her, I firmly believe she was penalized for being a powerful woman. And that is unacceptable.
No, it's not unacceptable. Nothing that's going on here has been acceptable. And what's been unacceptable is that we're tolerating them treating us unacceptably. Understand what I'm saying? We're just like, really? And there's nothing we can do about that. I think the biggest fight here that we should all come out with is somehow we should set term limits straight across the board. You got twice in there, you know what? That's the end, judge. Or else you create these little gods that sit down behind there and do whatever they want. They're continuing in there. And no judge or magistrate in the state of Texas, we have to fight for that, because they're going to go back for, we have to change it somehow for them not to be appointed. Okay? Because they can do whatever they want, and they'll condemn somebody, and there's no accountability. There has to be some way we can hold these judges accountable. And it's not happening. And it doesn't, not only just for the family court. I mean, it goes out through all the courts, but family court is the one that's most visible.
Right.
And it's the one that people kind of just like turn their heads on, They want to be the good Christian, let's turn the other cheek. No, it's now time to say we have a problem here.
So,
right,
Professor,
I feel like we sweep it under the rug. Oh, sorry, Taryn.
well, I was going to say, because I think we've kind of come to the point, and from all of this talk and stuff like that, we kind of have identified the problem. We saw what happened last night, and we kind of know the way forward. But for all the people kind of watching who may not be as involved in this, both you, Sarah, and Professor, what would you say? Because I'm more of a numbers guy and a research guy. I'm not as out there as the two of you. What would you say to the average person, how they start going about getting the attention of their elected officials so that we can make this change? So it's not just, the three of us talking here at 10:45 at night on a Tuesday. How do they start going and doing that?
And Sarah can go ahead and start.
So in my opinion, the first thing that they need to do is they need to start going to their legislators' town halls. They need to start scheduling meetings with their legislators. They need to start asking their legislators in these town halls and in public, and most of them are doing online ones now. You need to start asking them, what's your view on shared parenting? And you need to start asking questions. You need to start having them have the dialogue with you. And we need to start looking at that. We do have a policy poll that has been made available across all of the groups, which we can continue to push out, which does show that Texans overall, as a large majority, support children having maximized time with both fit and loving parents. This is something that the Texans in our state, we all agree with. So we need to start having that conversation. We need to start having this conversation with people outside our general family. You need to make sure you're talking about it. You need to make sure other people who have never been to family court understand what's actually happening. Many of the people that I talk to that have never been in this, they think that children already get it. They think that because we have a presumption of joint managerial conservator, that means children get to split their time. That is not what this means. And we need to make sure that we're educating everyone. We need to keep this conversation out in the open. We do not need to let it die over the next 2 years. And we need to build that momentum so that if HB 803 does not pass, that next session, the wheels are already in motion and we already have everybody's attention, and other people are contacting their legislators and saying, my coworker only gets their kid 25% of the time. Have you seen the statistics that are related to that? These kids need their other parent. So that's my opinion.
And I'll end it with this. I'm a little bit more in your face. You know, I've had, you know, and, you know, I see the fight and we have to take the fight back with them. We have to fight smart. We have been. But now to the point that it's the last round and we're losing by points. So we basically have to knock out the person that's in front of us if we're going to win the bout. Now, by that token, I will tell everybody, register yourself to vote. The next session that comes around, any and all magistrates that are up there, depending from district court to county courts to whatever, vote them out, vote somebody else in. Period. Start there. Get involved with campaigns. Get to know the people that are running. Get to know the people that are running against those that are there. Find out by both sides what their issue is on 50-50 parenting, on interference with child custody, what's going on. Make your decision and vote the other person out. Right now, it's time to vote. And right now, without us voting any and all magistrates out, this stuff here is going to be, with 10 years from now, we're going to be sitting down, drinking some scotch, talking about what happened today, talking about what we're going to do tomorrow at legislation with other people in front of us still in the fight. And until we can't remove those people that are doing wrong, we've lost this fight. That's my intake. I might sound harsh, but that's the reality of this. And unfortunately, I'm very proud to see both of you all and see all the parents that went in there and fought. And I see your passion because you all love your kids, like many parents out there that sometimes are too tired to fight. They give you the smiles and the thumbs ups and the likes. You guys are a beacon of light to many, including myself. But what I say is a little bit different because I've seen the political spectrum and how it works. And it's not going to change unless we start voting these judges out.
Well, I feel you on that comment on being tired. I think Sarah and I can both agree on that. It's been a rough couple of days.
I am worn out. But I think he segued for us into something really great, which I know that we had originally planned, and I think I sidetracked us to talk about at the beginning. But the people who showed up yesterday, it was absolutely amazing. We had some amazing parents. You know, I know everybody wants to talk about dads like they're deadbeats or they're this or they're that. But one of my favorite ones is this really, really large macho guy who gets up at 5 a.m. to work out every day. Yeah, I needed a nap after he told me that as well. But like super buff. And then there is a picture of him in a black t-shirt with pink glitter writing that says "Dance Dad." He took his 3-year-old for her birthday to get her hair done. So her pink tiara with the number 3 fit on her hair just right. I mean, these dads now not all of them, I'm sure, but the ones that showed up yesterday, they are about their kids. They are about being dads. Taryn, was there anybody who's just really stuck out to you?
You know, this is gonna relate to the dads that are doing it, but for one, the testimony that stuck out most to me was the Marine who spoke about how he's lost more soldiers, or hit Marine. I say soldiers because I was in the Army, but he noted that the guys he knows that were his Marines that are committing suicide, 11 out of the 13 were being taken away from their kids, were being taken away from them. And that the VA has noted that the number 2 reason for suicide for veterans comes from these family court issues. And my brothers and sisters that have stood up to the left and right of me get treated worse than dirt in these family courts. They're willing to die for their country. Something that allegedly is one of the best things, not the death part, but standing up and saying, raising your right hand and saying, I'm willing to die for my country. And then they're being told you can lead men or women to their death to fight wars overseas, but you can't even come back and raise your children. That infuriates me. And that's, you know, there were lots of great testimonies, but as a veteran, that one stuck out most to me.
You know,
Mike?
and I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna say this. Boils back to what I say. This fight, they have destroyed way too many, condemned too many people. They have caused too many, and they just prance around, they smile and they wave, stating that they're doing something good when they really could care less about the child or the court. It's just another case. Right now, like I said, and I'll repeat it again, right now it's time to vote judges out. All across Texas, any and all judge that is up and he has an opponent, vote him out. See, but what happens? Attorneys don't want to stand up against the judge because then all of a sudden he can't get his case through there. So we need to find good attorneys that are willing to become great judges. And that's not happening. Understand? And so it's something that's just, it's a problem that we have until we have that. So I think right now we have to get a couple of state representatives that are going to want to put, and senators that want to change term limits, you know, and they're not going to want to do that. They don't want to do that, you know, and it's unfortunate, but it boils back down to that. That's where, like you said, Sarah, it starts in what? The law. We have to start changing our laws. We have to start changing the laws on how we do elections as well. And when we don't do that, if we don't do that, we will never see any change in the future. You know,
Right.
get worse.
But it was just so we've been being really bummer about yesterday because we've been talking about a lot of the negatives, but I think we should wrap it up with the positives. So we had 150 people show up. We had dads, we had grandmothers, we had stepmothers, we had mothers. We had a mother who was an alienator. She was an alienator until she had a wow moment with her daughter and realized what she was doing to her own child. And she got up there and she spoke for HB 803. We had 50-50 parents. We had 2 teenagers. So we had the 50-50 child, and we had a young lady who has been denied the bond, the sisterly bond with her sister because of the family courts. These are things that never go away. We had a brother, a grown man who, on the same note, was denied that brotherly bond. And even as a middle-aged man, he still does not have that bond because it never had the opportunity to recover because he only saw his older brother 4 days a month. We had all of these people, and it was just inspiring to see them. Not only did we have the Marine that Taryn was talking about, but we had another veteran who got up there who talked about how, as a non-custodial parent, he's followed by security at the school, that how it takes away the conflict. There was another woman who got up and talked about the fact that everybody wants to talk about domestic violence. Yes, 1 in 3 women are reported to have suffered it, but 1 in 4 men also. I wish I had the opportunity to give her the data, but there was a 2019 study that was done where men, we talked about it on a previous version or a previous podcast, men actually reported at point something percent higher than women, saying that they had been the victims of domestic violence. We had a young man who got up there who was the victim of rape, who was the victim of domestic violence. Our testimony and the people that got up yesterday, we represented every race, every gender. We represented every single demographic across this country.
And every combination of custody as well.
Yes. Yes. And the only reason why we did not have representatives from the LGBTQ community is because the Zoom testimony was limited.
You know, and you all did wonderful. And for all you parents out there, keep the fight. I know you all love your kids, and I'm going to end that because it's something that every single one of you, I see two great parents here. Okay. I saw a bunch of parents out there that had a gleam of hope in their eyes because they were fighting for the right to see their child. Most beautiful thing that we can see when people go in there in a peaceful assembly trying to do the good. And we can, like I say, keep fighting for it. It's you know, chip away here, chip away there. Eventually, they're going to fall down, and we just have to bring the fight to them. That's the way I look at it. Not and literally saying, but you know what I'm talking about. And hopefully they do.
Figuratively, it's a metaphor.
You know what I'm saying, because some of these guys over there, they get things crossed. And yes, we're going to vote you out if we can.
Heck yeah.
I did not endorse that message.
You know what? There was a time when there were consequences for
we need to sit down and basically think and put our heads together, because that is the common denominator. That is where the problem lies. And I think that's what we need to focus our attention on.
And if you know somebody who's willing to stand up to do this and willing to run for office, put them in contact with the professor, and we're going to help you.
Absolutely.
I just also want to note, even though we don't have solid proof and it's only in one case, the only person who voted against the 50-50 bill in Kentucky was immediately voted out of office in their next election. One person does not make a trend, but it should be enough to question whether or not that vote for somebody who had been in that office for many years, if that vote was one of the key reasons why they did not win their next election.
Let me tell you something, Sarah. Last year, when the Wuhan flu came of age and everybody started cutting down because of the pandemic that we were in or still in, and everything was shut down, there was not a care from both Republican or Democrats about the livelihood of many fathers and dads, and we can go into it in there, or mothers or what have you. Small businesses were dying, and basically people were left hanging. Minimal help, even though they claim all these trillions, but they went elsewhere. But what I'm getting at is that every public official, especially in that voted for the closing in city council here, was not elected again. And there's others that are still in there, those incumbents. It's coming up, next election. Let's see if it continues. And, the governor is going to come out there, and I doubt he's going to be back. And so I think that trend is going to be there. I think people, the silent majority, which is us loving parents, we vote. And we're going to vote for the United States, for our towns to move forward, and for our families to move forward. And I think what you just said about that one person being voted out, you're going to see that trend go into this bill and those people that fought it. If we can unite, you're going to see a lot of people playing tiddlywinks instead of being in Capitol. Folks, we're going to end this session. We have two great parents out there. I want to thank you, Sarah and Taryn, for coming out here and telling us exactly what happened yesterday. Folks out there, I want you guys to be safe, stay safe, and always hug your kids. Okay? Till next time. Peace.